Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Nobody likes to see this word, recession, right? Even if I don't know what recession means, it still brings up all the feelings of fear and insecurity and just the craziness that kind of goes with tough economic times. We all probably have some concept that recession is about the economy, but I don't know about you, but I didn't really know what a recession was until I really started thinking about the fact that we might be headed into one. So I looked it up, and a recession, according to economists, is 2 or more quarters of decline of the gross domestic product, or the GDP. I don't know what that is. I think domestic product makes it sense that it's like stuff that we do or sell here, I guess. But the reality is this is a pretty complex thing. 2 or more quarters, and it officially puts us in a recession. I don't really understand really all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, as far as I can tell, a recession is really just a correction. It's a correction of the economic swing. So kind of think of it like a pendulum, like if you had a pendulum and that pendulum swings too far to one side, then we do a correction, or a recession kind of swings things back the other direction. If housing costs get too high, right, we try to make a correction. The housing costs get too high, so people don't buy houses, and so the pendulum starts to swing the other way. That's kind of how things go. The decline comes from the correction, and it happens to us all. But the truth of it is that even though we don't know what recession is, like we don't really have to understand it, there's a part of us that really have to understand that correction is a part of our life too. And if we want to recession-proof our life, we have to proof ourselves from having to have this pendulum swing. That's what happens, isn't it? Like economically, we wind up going too far to one side. And so to get to a little bit of correction, instead, we have to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side. We have to make a big deal out of where things are. So we got a really high economic time, so we kind of follow it up with a really low economic time. Then we go, oh, well, that's better, that's over now, so we swing back to good times. Isn't it make sense to you that, man, if we could do something to recession-proof and not have to ride the roller coaster of the pendulum, wouldn't that be much, much better for us if we could find a normal way? Now, I'm not talking about the nation. I'm not talking about the economy, because honestly, there's nothing really I can do about it. I can barely understand this statement, let alone what causes a recession or what comes into it or out of it. But what I can do is live in a way that recession-proofs my life, where my job, my marriage, my relationships, and my money are kind of recession-proofed. I can live that. I can live in a way that doesn't have me running the pendulum all the time based on how kind of things are in the world around me. But we don't do that too, either, do we? Naturally. I mean, we normally kind of live in a way, even with our money, in a way that kind of just still rides the roller coaster, the pendulum, don't we? Like we go out, times are good in our economy, we're making money, we're doing okay. So we go out to dinner, right? And then a couple weeks later, things aren't going so good. So we're like, no. How do you like bologna sandwiches for dinner? And then the next couple of weeks might go better, and we're like, hey, it's okay. We got money for a nice vacation. And then we follow it up with, oh, what crap, we ran out of money. And then we're telling the kids, 78 degrees is a totally normal place to put the thermostat, because we kind of run the pendulum back and forth. And isn't there a way to live in a way that kind of recession-proofs our life while the world around us is swinging left to right, and we're like, no, you know what? I'm going to live in a way that normalizes. Sure, there are small corrections, but man, it's a whole lot less ridiculous to live swinging a little left and a little right than it is to kind of just ride the high waves. I don't know about you, but I want that for my life. I want that for your life. So that's what we're talking about during this series, is this idea that we want to recession-proof our life, our whole picture. So, and that really all comes down to one word: wisdom. Wisdom is a key phrase. Now, wisdom's a tricky idea, though, to be honest with you. Wisdom is a tricky concept, because we have a tendency to think, I know something, so I have a little bit of wisdom. But the truth is that wisdom and knowing are not the same thing. Like, for instance, I can just tell you this, right? You like might use this illustration. You know, we always use this with our kids, right? We know that the stove is hot. And so we know that, right? So we're like, hey, the stove is hot. That's information. And then we know a second part of that. The stove is hot, and if I touch hot things, I'm going to get burned. That's information. But that's not wisdom. Wisdom is saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to live in a way where I don't touch the stove. Wisdom isn't knowledge. Knowledge is separate. It's a contributor to wisdom. But wisdom is us putting our knowledge in action. Wisdom is making use of what we know. Think about it in terms of your life, in terms of your money, in terms of your relationships, in terms of your work, whatever it is. Think about it. Knowing the right thing to do is one thing, but then ordering our life in a way where we apply it to our life, where we know what to do and then we do it. So wisdom really is applying our knowledge and our experience to our actions. Wisdom is the enacting of those like moments that we know are right for us or know are wise or smart, and then actually doing. The thing is, I know a bunch of people who could say, man, when it comes to my money, I know how to do a budget. I'm super good at that, right? But then they struggle to live on a budget. That's a life that lacks wisdom. There are people that go, hey, I know how to handle this part of my relationship. I know how to handle my job and do it right. But then I struggle to actually have the wisdom to do it right. Knowledge and wisdom are related, but they're not the same thing. Because wisdom is really the ability to live life skillfully. And that's my hope for you. Because I got to be honest with you, the idea of running this pendulum swinging thing all the time is a roller coaster. And I don't know about you, but I get tired of it. I get tired of, hey, things are good, let's go. Hey, things are bad, let's not. Hey, this is good, this is bad. Man, I want to live in a place where I'm like, look, I don't have to worry about tomorrow because I can order my life in a way that allows me to not have to ride this craziness. I can make some corrections. I can live in a small way that puts a lot less stress on my life, on my relationships, on my expectations. Man, it's a whole lot more. And I think that we can live that life because that's exactly the life that God wants for us. That's exactly what God wants for your life. You see, God doesn't just want you to go to heaven when you die. God desires that you have a rich and full and complete and satisfying life and an abundant life. And He knows that the way to live that life, to have an abundant life, a life that really is fun and enjoyable to live, is not riding the swinging pendulum of the world around us, but instead living life skillfully or with wisdom, as Scripture says. So, like there's this one in Proverbs, this verse in Proverbs says this, that fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. Wisdom will multiply your days and add years to your life. Now look at this. If you become wise, you'll be the one to benefit. If you scorn wisdom, you'll be the one to suffer. Let's kind of unpack that for a second. It says that fear of the Lord is the foundation. It's the beginning of wisdom. Fear of God, like knowing God knows more than I do. Now, this isn't talking about fear like being afraid of. This is more like fear being in awe of. Fear of the Lord, or being in respect of God. Saying, God, you know for my life more than I know for my life. I love, we're going to talk about this later, but I love the idea of 12-step programs. I love the heart behind it. Recognizing that there is a God and I'm not Him. That's fear of the Lord. Fear of the Lord is the foundation. It's the building blocks of wisdom. But He says, knowing God, not just knowledge, information, but knowledge or knowing the Holy One results in good judgment. Us applying our fear, respect, like value for God, right? Us applying that to our life and having a real and personal relationship, knowing Him, results in good judgment. But my favorite part is that ending. If you become wise, you'll be the one that benefits from it. But if you push back on wisdom, you live opposite of wisdom, you'll be the one to suffer. I don't know about you, but I want to be the one to benefit. The one that benefits is the one who doesn't have to ride the swings of culture around us, right? Who says, man, economically, it doesn't matter to me because I've lived life in a way where I have some normalcy, right? Relationally, I don't have to swing with everybody else and like go left or right and just kind of go crazy. He loves me, he hates me, this thing. I can choose to live in a way that's wise. And I can choose to not have to ride the crazy cycle that the world around me rides. Because I will follow wisdom, because wisdom will allow me to be the one to benefit. But if I push away from it, I'm the one who suffers. So I think that we can do that. Now, today we're going to talk about our financial lives, like the reality of the world that we live in, that we have to talk about. How is it that I live in a way that doesn't put so much pressure on my life? The first thing, I can be honest with you, if we're going to order our financial lives in a way that doesn't have to go crazy, the first thing has to be the most important thing, right? So number one, put God first. I can honestly say to you that this is a key piece of living a life that is financially normalized and doesn't have to go, oh, it's a recession, it's crazy. Oh, it's this thing. We don't have to be so worried about it. For 27 years, Sheila and I have put God first in our financial life. And it's been a choice, an intentional choice, not because we feel like we owe God something, and not just because the church needs the money or those kinds of silly things, but because we really honestly believe that when God is first, everything else has a way of working itself out. Putting God first in your finances matters in your life. Now, I think there's more to it than this, but putting God first is saying, God, I believe that 90% of my income with your blessing is literally more money than 100% of my income without it. There's this verse in the book of Malachi, maybe you've heard it before, and he says, bring all the tithes, that means a tenth, bring all the tenths of our income into the storehouse so there'll be enough food in my temple. If you do this, says the Lord of heaven's armies, I will open up the windows of heaven for you. I'll pour out blessings so great you won't even have enough room to take it in. Try it. Put me to the test. You know, there's a lot of other times in Scripture where God says, don't test me in this. Don't push this. Don't do this. But this is one where he says, listen, try it out. Give it a shot. This idea of tithing, of choosing to say, God, you are the most important in my life, is for Sheila and I just a simple check. We literally give online. We give by text message, honestly, and the rhythmic kind of way that comes out is the first of every month, 10% of our salaries go right back to God. We give it right back to church. Now listen, of all the people, couldn't I get away with it? I mean, like, the church is the one that pays me. Do I really need to give 10% of it back to the church? Yes, I do. Because it's a choice for me to say, God, I believe that 90% of my income with your blessing is literally more than 100% without it, because I don't do this to fund the mission here. I do this because I want to live in a way that fears, respects, honors God. And honoring God says, listen, I will give 10%. And I love this. Test me out, try me. See what happens. Put me to the test. That has been for 27 years. I can honestly say we've put God to the test and he has delivered every time. There's certainly times in life where, like, instead of riding this crazy pendulum, we've still had to make some corrections. Maybe there were times when man, you know, the kids were born, or different times where money was tight, right? And we chose to live in a way where it was, man, it needed to, 2 plus 2 needed to equal 5 sometimes. And sometimes we had to got to this place where honoring God, I really believed, allowed 2 plus 2 to equal 5 if it needed to. Because putting God to the test says, listen, I trust that God is who he says he is, and he'll do what he says he's going to do. And he says, I'll pour out a blessing so great you won't have room to take it in. We have been blessed by God in so many ways. And I believe it's not because we made a deal with God, but because we honor God. And let me just point this out to you. God honors the things that honor him. Living wisely financially allows God to honor him. No, that's enough about that one. But putting God first has got to be the most important thing. And here's the reason why, just real quick. To be honest with you, you know what we all want in our lives? We want God's blessing. But it's kind of hard to say, God, would you bless something that I'm not even going to prioritize you in? Would you just bless my life financially, and then I'll bless you or I'll honor you? That doesn't make any sense. What we have to do is come to a place where we say, God, I honor you and I trust you. And that allows his blessing. That's enough about that. The second thing I would say is that not only putting God first, but pay down debt. Debt is killing us, right? I mean, the idea that we owe, and that way means that if I owe money, I have to work to fund that debt or service that debt. Paying down debt puts us in a place where freedom can really be the case. Now listen, I'm not like some people who just are against debt and all this stuff, but I do realize what Scripture says is really so valuable. Proverbs says it this way, that just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. I don't think that God's saying that that's an evil thing in this verse particularly, but he's saying, listen, you have to live with wisdom and know that when you sign a contract to owe money on something, that you now have to service that contract, right? You now have to service that debt. So your absolutely have to amount of money that you got to make, that absolutely have to amount of money is now, instead of here, it's now just a little higher. We go, hey, listen, we have to make this much money to survive and crack the nut, to get through the week, to get through the month. And if you sign a contract to owe something, now the have to is a little bit higher. It's like this pendulum again, right? The have to, when we get to that point, we go, man, owing nothing, my pendulum is very still. All I have to do is put food on the table. All I have to do is do the absolute necessity. But the more debt we have, the wider the pendulum swings. And we have a lot of debt, man, we're just like, look, I got to make this amount of money to make it work. So paying down debt not only a wise thing to do, it will help your life. I'm guessing that you have been, every one of us have been at some point in a place where you go, man, I've got more debt than I wish I had. When I got to be honest, I got to go back to the first one. Sheila and I decided early on that we had, we'd racked up some debt very early in our marriage, and it was more than we really could do, more than we really could serve. And we knew that we wanted to have kids. And we decided, hey, listen, we're going to pay down debt. And we decided that in that I was going to get a kind of a side job. And so I got another side job and I started making some money. And we were just like every bit of that is going straight to debt. We were taking every bit of it and putting it straight to debt. And that was a good idea. My father-in-law came over one day and he said, man, I just want to talk to you about something. And it was wonderful, to be honest, because he came over and he said, listen, I just want to challenge you on something. I know that you guys really aren't tithing on that money that you're trying to pay down debt with. And I get it, I understand it, but I just want to challenge you to put God first in your relationship. And I really never thought about it, honestly, because I was just thinking we tithe on the main income and I'd just get this side hustle thing and pay off debt. But when he challenged me in that, we decided all of a sudden, hey, we're going to choose to bless God first, right? We're going to choose to honor God and put him first in our life. And when we did, that side job that was making a little bit of money, all of a sudden made a lot of money. And in just a very short amount of time, our little thermometer that I drew to pay off debt, that little thermometer filled up really quickly. We paid off debt in literally the week that we sent away money on our last bill to pay off all of our debt. We found out we were pregnant with Marissa. That's powerful to us because putting God first and then choosing to live wisely and pay down that debt and get rid of it was an unbelievable blessing to us because we were no longer servant to the lender. We could be a servant to God and normalize that kind of pendulum crazy swing that was hanging over our head. The third thing I'd say, honor God, put him first. Pay down debt, number 2. And third, build a cushion. Build a cushion in life. Isn't it true that when there are corrections in life and the pendulum goes to swing, one of the things that most easily keeps us from riding that craziness is saying, listen, I got a little bit of money. Because when it gets tight, if I've got a little bit of cash, this thing is much harder to move, right? If I've got a little cash pushed away, or I've got a little bit of edge in my income where I don't have to have every single dollar that comes in, I think if I can have a cushion in the income that comes in, if I can have a cushion in a savings account somewhere else, man, it's much harder to make this thing swing so hard. Because at the end of the day, our cushion is what will make room for us not having the madness. So building a cushion, let me just talk about what that means. The first thing we have to do is make a little bit of room between what comes in our household, right? And the gap between what it takes to make things happen. And the only way to do that, and I mean this, the only way to do this is not make more money. The only way to do this is not cramp down on some things and let other things go crazy. The only way to build a cushion or a gap or a margin between what comes in and what needs to go out is to recognize that you live on a budget, because managed money goes further. Such an important principle, such a powerful and important tool for us to understand is that managed money goes further. Can I tell you something? Every last one of you lives on a budget. Every one of you. Some of you are like, no, I don't live on a budget. No, you do live on a budget. See, the difference between you and me is that I live on a budget that I understand before the month begins. Some of you don't find out what your budget was until the end of the month. Now, can I ask this question? Whose money do you think goes further? I mean, the only way that Sheila and I have been able to live on one income for 27 years, and she's now working part-time, but the reality is that all of our lives we've lived on a budget, is the only way we've done that is because living on a budget allows us to live on less money, because managed money goes further. So every single dollar that comes into our home, and this is how to live in wisdom, create a cushion in your life, every single dollar that comes into your home should have a place to go before the month begins. It's not that hard, really. It's very simple. You have some pretty set in stone budget things that you know what your house payment costs, you know what your rent costs, you know what your cars cost, you know what those things, and you can set aside, hey, you know that like every year you're gonna have to renew the plates on your cars, right? You're gonna have to renew the registration. Every year you're gonna have to pay property taxes. Every year you're gonna have to do those things. All you have to do is write them down. Now some of you are going, man, I live on a crazy income. Some months I make this, some months I make this, some months I make this. I had this conversation with one of our daughters who is a waitress. She serves tables and while she's away at school. And we were talking about how she can live on a budget, because she's like, I need to have some big girl conversations. I need to talk about how to live on a budget. And so I just asked her, how much have you made on average over the last year? She's been doing this job for a year. And you can take the highs and the lows and the highs and the lows, right? So I said to her, like, what's the average? Not the high, not the low. So she looked back and decided that she makes a certain amount per hour on average, highs and lows, right? Or a certain amount per week. You can do the same thing. Look back over the last year. You can look at your W-2 from last year and go, hey, how much money did I make? Divide that by 52. And you know what that is? That's an average of what you made last year. Build your budget on the average. When you have high months, you put the rest away. When you have low months, you use that, right? So you can do it. I know you don't think you can, but I promise that you can. It's just math, right? It's not that hard. Managed money goes further. And if you'll choose to manage it, it will automatically create it. Jesus talked about it this way in Luke. He says, but don't begin a project, right, until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there's enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money. He's saying, look, your managed money goes further. And then everyone would laugh at you. And they would say, there's a person who started the building and couldn't afford to finish it. You know what we do every week when we live out without a budget? We start projects we can't afford to finish. And then we wonder why there's not enough money to get through the month. Right? And we wonder why there's still another week to go before the end of the money, and the money's already run out. Because we started a month without counting the cost first. Managed money goes further. Now, the other thing I think that we can do is is make sure that we're living in a way that's reasonable, right? Like that, with this old phrase, how about this one? Make hay while the sun shines. Making hay when the sun shines means that we're just going to choose to do what we can do while we can do it. Now, I'm not just talking about making extra money, right? I think there's ways that we can save while we can save. Like, for instance, one of those ways might be figuring out what your average income is, and then knowing that, hey, this is a month where we're making more money than we do on low months. So we're going to choose to take the extra above the average and put it away, so that when the lower months come in, we can use that money to kind of make up the difference. Averages are there for a reason. You know, another thing you can do to create some cushion in your life is, when I'm talking about making hay when the sun shines, is live wisely, right? Stop doing stupid stuff, right? Man, if you're eating out 5 times a week and you're like, man, this is killing us, you know what you should do? Stop doing that. Can I just say this for you? Also, stop playing the lottery. I'm not saying that it's wrong to play the lottery. I'm not giving you a hard time about it. I'm just saying it's dumb. You know what the lottery is? It's a tax for people who are bad at math. You have a better chance of getting struck by lightning twice in the same day than you do of hitting the lottery. So what you're doing is just spending money for no reason. Use that money to build a cushion. Now listen, I'm not saying you can't go have some fun. It'd be fun to, spend a buck and dream. It's funny, right? It's enjoyable, maybe. But man, if you're trying to get rich quick, you're dumb. Quit doing that. That doesn't make any sense. Use that money to create a buffer. Another thing you can do to create a buffer is get a side hustle. Just put some money away, right? You got some money that you're going to put away in savings, and you're just going to start pushing it away, because one day the pendulum's going to need to swing the other direction. And a savings account, some money put away in an emergency fund, some money put away to keep things from being so crazy, is an unbelievable reliever of stress. When you've got a little bit of cash, you don't have to worry so much. Life doesn't get so crazy. So get a side hustle, right? To put away a couple $1,000s, right? Go do it right now. Like, can I be honest with you? Can I just tell you what I do as a side hustle? On Tuesdays and Thursday mornings, I give plasma twice a week, because I make $480 a month. $480 a month for sitting in a chair. It's not that hard, right? I know you're like, my pastor gives plasma. Yeah, it's fun. It doesn't matter. I sit there for an hour and a half, and they give me $480 a month. You know another thing I do? Sometimes I use my lunch hour, and I'll use maybe an hour or two in the evening when I normally just be watching TV in the evening, and I deliver DoorDash, or I go Instacart. Yes, if you Instacart, there's a good chance I'm going to show up at your house and deliver your groceries to you. Why? Because managed money goes further, and I want to make hay while the sun shines. I can put this away so that the next time this idea of this recession wants to swing one way or another in my life, I don't have to ride the crazy train, right? I love the song, don't love the feeling of riding the crazy train, right? So we can do better than that. Look at this reality that people, the folks in this room, the folks watching online who've been a part of 12-step program before today, you have a leg up on us, don't you? Because you've already been praying the idea of what we're talking about today. Wisdom gives us peace. And so here's this serenity prayer, maybe that you're familiar with, but if you've been through a 12-step program of any kind, you've prayed it. And it's this simple statement: God, grant me the serenity, the peace, the wisdom, right, to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Let's just unpack that for a second, because it matters to our life. There are some things you can't control. Am I right? There are some things that are just too far away or too big for us to manage. You can't control a crisis, can you? You can't control a medical emergency. You can't control an accident. You can't control the economy of the U.S. government, the world we live in, right? You can't control the property tax rate. But you know what? There are some things that you can control. There are some things that I know that I can't control, but there are some things I can. I can control putting money away and saving. I can control living within my means, living on a budget. I can control that I want to put God first. I can control that I want to pay down debt. There are some things that I can't control, but there are also some things that I can control. And here's the deal. Wisdom is knowing the difference and then doing something about it. That's really what it boils down to. We all know, right? Should I put God first? Yes. Should I pay down debt? Yes. Should I build a cushion or a buffer in my life? Yes. Every last person within the sound of my voice is fully aware of what they should do. Wisdom is taking our shoulds and putting it into action, right? Can I just tell you this? Please, don't should all over yourself. I should do that, right? I should this, I should that. Don't should all over yourself. Make a difference. Because like we talked about in the very beginning, that verse, that if you can live wisely, if you follow wisdom, you'll be the one to benefit from it. But if you don't follow wisdom, if you shun wisdom, you'll be the one to pay the price. There's some things you can't control. That's how life is. Some things that are out of your reach. Those are the places where we just have to say, God, I'm going to do this. I'm going to control the things I can. I'm going to live wisely the things I can, so that when things are out of control, I don't have to ride the crazy train. That I can trust you. Because wisdom is knowing the difference between those two and then doing something about it. That's my hope for you. And I know that if you'll do that, it'll recession-proof your money.